Well, here we are, Garth and I, sitting in the living room of my apartment on October the 17th, 2006, and I'm going to be telling you about the Blackfoot Reserve, which is located in Gleason, Alberta, east of Calgary. But the people weren't always on the reserves, the Indians. Before 1877, they roamed the country, the vast plains of Alberta, following the buffalo, and of course to kill them because they were the main source of food. The population of the buffalo at that time were between 50 and 60 million buffalo, and they ranged from Red Deer, Alberta, down to California and east to the Atlantic coast. But by far the largest herds were in Alberta and Saskatchewan. Male buffalo adult weighs about 2,600 pounds, and the herds of buffalo, of course, were enormous. It's on record that some herds could be as wide as 20 miles, and that they, going through a single spot, it would take them an hour for the last buffalo to hit that spot. And from this they could calculate the number of buffalo that were in a herd, and they were over 1 million. Now, they hunted the buffalo, of course, on foot to begin with dogs, and later in the 1700s with horses. Now, they would just drive the first buffalo on foot, and they would kill them with their bows and arrows. Later, when they got dogs, of course, that would help a lot because the dogs could transport their meager belongings, and they could make better time. When they got the horses, of course, they could drive them into these ambushes in the corrals. And once they got them into the compound, they would just kill them. With the chase, they would just chase the buffalo, and when they killed them with their bow and arrow, then they would butcher them then and there. And this is when they would find out the value of the buffalo to them. And if they were successful, they would butcher them there and then. And there's a picture of the chase, and the next picture, I believe, is about the butchering of the buffalo. Beside the food, when they killed the buffalo, they fashioned the bones to make tools in which they could make items that could scrape hides and work leather and make sewing instruments. They could also, when they found they could use the sinews and the hair and twist them to make cord, which is good for rope. And they could use the horns and the bladder and the stomach pouches for containers. And of course, the buffalo dropped flat patties all over the prairie, which dried, and they could gather them up and use them for heat. So that was their food, and their needs met pretty well. Well, they had to kill more buffalo than they could eat. They did waste the meat, but when you think about it, they made their teepees out of the hides. Maybe 8 hides to make a teepee. Now, with the hunt, aside from them driving into the compound and the chase, they would drive them over sheer cliffs. The sheer cliffs were called buffalo jumps, and you can see that they are very steep cliffs. And the buffalo are very short-sighted, and they do not see very well. And particularly at dusk, they could drive those buffalo over the hill, and they would just turn over and over, and that one on top of another, and they would kill them. They would die, and they'd finish them off with their bows and arrows. Now, this picture is a buffalo jump that is 2 miles north of Gleason on the main highway. Then the next picture you see is a picture of the bones that collect when those buffalo are dropped over the cliffs. They mine those bones in huge quantities, as you can see, and they would be transferred to Medicine Hat, Alberta, and made into fertilizer. And during the Second World War, they were used in making ammunition. Okay, the Indians had different capabilities. They were brave warriors, and they were interpreters and guides and scouts. But one of the great men was Jerry Potts, and he was the son of a Scotsman who worked for the fur trade, and his mother was a blood Indian, so he was a half-breed. He was an interpreter, a guide, scout. He could track like a bloodhound. He could fight like an Indian, and he could shoot like a sharpshooter. He was a rough guy, but he was very comfortable in most situations. He was very comfortable with the Indians in their council chambers in the teepee. He was comfortable with the rough and tough white man in the saloons, and he could interpret with the Northwest Mounted Police. In this picture, he is interpreting between Chief Crowfoot and the Northwest Mounted Police. And on the right is a picture of his grave, which is in McLeod, Alberta. And when he was buried, he was given full military honors. This is Chief Crowfoot, and Chief Crowfoot was head of the Blackfoot Confederation. The Blackfoot Confederation included the Pagan tribe, the Blood tribe, the Stony tribe, the Sarcee, and the Blackfeet. He was a man of peace, but he was a brave warrior. He was loyal to the Northwest Rebellion. He was a wonderful counselor. He had great wisdom, and he was called the father of his people. The next picture is a picture of the cairn that was raised in Gleason in about 1927. He died in 1890, and this cairn is to commemorate his life. This picture is a picture of 2 scouts in front of the 3 Northwest Mounted Police, and the 2 behind are also guides or scouts. And the next picture is a picture of Father Lacombe, who was a missionary who lived with the Blackfoot tribe, and on the left is a picture of Chief Crowfoot, and I think Sitting Bull is on the right. He's another chief. Well, these three were invited to Ottawa and were honored by the government because they had been loyal to the government. They negotiated with their own Indians so that they did not join the Northwest Rebellion. The Blackfoot tribe was well liked by the government. This is a picture of the Indians in full regalia with all their feathered headgear and their beaded costumes. They wore them in. They had a picture there of the the British flag. That Indian is holding up the British flag, if I'm not mistaken. And the next picture, of course, is a picture of a travois with a horse. See how they have the poles, and they can put the hides and all their belongings behind the horse, and then of course the horse travels along with them and carries their belongings. This really changed their life. Look how flat that prairie is. And here we have a grave. The grave, when the Indians died, they would be put in a box with all their belongings and left on the top of a hill. By 1870, the white man had arrived, and they shot buffalo for a sport. And believe it or not, the buffalo were near extinction by 1870. The Indians were starving. The federal government knew that something had to be done because starving people are dangerous people. And so they decided that they would negotiate with the different tribes to help them. And the Indians in the tribe, the Blackfoot tribe, trusted the Northwest Mounted Police and the Queen. And so negotiations went ahead, and in 1877, the tribes gathered together, the Pagans and the Bloods and the Sarcee and the Stoney and the full Blackfoot Confederacy with the chiefs. And they met with the Northwest Mounted Police and the members of the federal government at a place called Blackfoot Crossing in the Bow Valley. And this is a picture of them with their negotiations and with the treaty that they arrived at. The treaty terms were that they ceded the tribal lands to the government. And the Blackfoot Treaty, as seen in the picture, reads, on September the 27th, 1877, Indians in southern Alberta gathered at Blackfoot Crossing to sign a treaty with the white people. All tribes, Bloods, Stonies, Sarcees, Blackfeet, and Pagans, still warlike, fiercely proud of hunting grounds, yet the Indian leaders recognized the friendship of the Queen and her mounted police and faithfully made a pact for as long as the grass shall grow. So the terms of the treaty were that the Indians themselves would cede the tribal lands to the